The drop in productivity, which mirrored a sharp decline in economic growth, is temporary and Federal Reserve officials are likely to shrug off the spike in labor costs, analysts said. And weather impacts are temporary, and as such, we should see productivity growth rebound substantially in the second quarter as economic growth strengthens, said Sam Bullard, a senior economist at Wells Fargo Securities in Charlotte, North Carolina. And productivity declined at a 1.7% annual rate, the biggest drop since the first quarter of 2013, the Labor Department said on Wednesday. And productivity, which measures hourly output per worker, advanced at a 2.3% pace in the fourth quarter, and economists had expected it to fall at a rate of only 1.0% in the first 3 months of the year. And an unusually cold and snowy winter in large areas of the United States slammed output, which rose at a feeble 0.3% rate, breaking sharply from the fourth quarter's brisk 3.8% pace. And the decline in productivity was in tandem with an abrupt slowdown in economic growth in the first quarter. And gross domestic product expanded at a 0.1% annual rate, the government said in its advance estimate last week, a slowdown from the fourth quarter's 2.6% rate. And however, subsequent data on March trade, factory orders and construction spending suggest the economy actually contracted in the first 3 months of the year. And productivity trended steady, and the trend in productivity, however, remains modestly up. Compared to the first quarter of 2013, productivity increased 1.4%. Workers put in more hours in the first quarter, but with output falling, that raised labor costs. And unit labor costs, the price of labor per single unit of output, surged at a 4.2% rate after falling at a 0.4% rate in the fourth quarter. It was the biggest rise in unit labor costs since the fourth quarter of 2012. And economists had expected unit labor costs to increase at a 2.6% rate. Despite the rise last quarter, there was little sign that wage inflation was igniting. And unit labor costs rose only 0.9% compared to the first quarter of 2013. And I am not seeing any firming trend in wages at this point, said Alan McEachin, an economist at Navy Federal Credit Union in Vienna, Virginia. I don't think we are going to see a firming in wages at least for a year. The market thinks the Fed will start to tighten policy mid to late 2015. And a government report last week showed labor costs increased at their slowest pace in more than 2 years in the first quarter. In addition, the closely watched employment report released last week showed wage growth was stagnant in March. And slack in the jobs market is suppressing wage inflation, keeping overall price pressures in the economy benign. And though temporary, the drop in productivity and weak economic growth bode ill for hiring. Employers added 569,000 jobs in the first quarter. And Daniel Silver, an economist at JP Morgan in New York, said a combination of solid labor demand and weak GDP growth in first quarter probably will not be sustained. And, reporting by Lucia Mudiani, editing by Andrea Ricci and James Dalglish, and so, weather is only partially to blame, as the economists had already forecast a 1.0% decline. Sure, inflation is not an issue, provided you're done in number 8217, to look at the prices for fuel, groceries or rent. These only happen to be the 3 biggest issues impacting a working family. For so living inside the 5 wealthiest counties surrounding Washington and number 8211, no problem. And like I said many times, more BS about weather and number 8230, and how many more months will we blame the and number 8216 cold weather and number 8217 for bad economy? Ridiculous. And back to top, and Thomson Reuters is the world's largest international multimedia news agency, providing investing news, world news, business news, technology news, headline news, small business news, news alerts, personal finance, stock market, and mutual funds information available on Reuters.com, video, mobile, and interactive television platforms. Thomson Reuters journalists are subject to an editorial handbook which requires fair presentation and disclosure of relevant interests. NYSE and Amex quotes delayed by at least 20 minutes. Nasdaq delayed by at least 15 minutes. For a complete list of exchanges and delays, please click here.